diaries, I have the collection of photographs from the people who stayed at the base camp of Robert Falcon Scott's infamous attempt to reach the South Pole. Lots of them arrived at the edge of the Antarctic plate, but only 5 left the base camp to race to the pole itself against Amundsen, the Norwegian. Now, of course, historians, both cruel and kind, have tried to analyse why, and this is a spoiler if you don't know how it ends, Robert Falcon Scott, Captain Scott's attempt failed in the death of all 5. There's a haunting picture on the diary cover and anywhere on the internet of the 5 men literally at the bottom of the world, with the Union flag half-heartedly blowing in the wind, and their skin burned black with the sun striking the snow. Men dejected and defeated because they arrived second. The Norwegian team beat them, and by the time they made their return, every one of them was dead 11 miles out of what was known as One Ton Camp, which had food stocks and medicines. But how could you spot it in a snow blizzard when you're 11 miles away from a featureless terrain? When they found the bodies of Scott's team, they were emaciated. The Norwegians' team put on weight, believe it or not, in the expedition. So, why did Scott fail? Well, I'm sure there's hundreds of reasons why, I suppose. But I think there's 2 main reasons. One, Amundsen favoured dogs. He had seen that indigenous people used the dogs to pull weight across the terrain. But Captain Scott, being British, favoured horses. By the time he reached the pole, all the horses were dead and had been eaten. Amundsen favoured fur. Again, he watched the indigenous peoples and he saw they wore fur in these climates. Captain Scott, being British, decided for wool. Wool that froze hard and needed the little heat that they had to thaw the clothes so they could be soft enough to put the socks on. The socks on soaking wet, of course, and the other garments soaking wet and freezing. The mystery isn't why they died on the way back. The mystery is how they even got there in the first place. It's actually, I think, not just a lack of diligence, but it verges on cruelty to call men and fail to equip them. They were brave, but they were ill-equipped. Many people imagine that when you follow the Lord Jesus, your life really ought to be much better than what it is right now. Because I doubt there's any of us in here living at this moment in time the perfect life. Doesn't he move mountains, they say? Doesn't he remove the obstacles, they say? You are answering his call, but you bury your loved ones. You go to hospital anxious. You're worried about the cost of living. You're worried that Russia will not stop with Ukraine. Are you so different from me, they say? Isn't it cruel to give this level of following? Well, of course it would be if the Lord did not equip us. If you look in verse 1 of Psalm 13, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? There's someone in a trough. There's someone in the bottom of a valley. How long? He's obviously not enjoying it. David's not having a good time. Look at how the psalm ends in verse 6. I'll sing to the Lord, for he's been good to me. And what I want to show you from this is David is able to transition from the pit to the mountaintop, not because God removes pits and mountains, any more than Captain Scott could have removed the glaciers and the mountains of Antarctica. But unlike Captain Scott, the Lord Jesus Christ, when he calls us, he equips us for what he calls us to do. That's our conviction. That's our hope. And Psalm 13 will show us this. The terrain of life that we traverse is essentially no different from anybody else's. It's the equipment which is different. It's the equipment the Lord gives that makes all the difference. So you succeed in traversing your life and you don't become a famous failure. Here's the first piece of hope. It's hope when we are down, even in the valley floor. As we read verse 1 and 2, I want to show you 3 traumas, 3 fractures. I know you hear the phrase 4 times, how long, but there's only 3 breaks, and we'll list them. Verse 1, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? And how long will you hide your face from me? He doubles the first break, I think, because it's the biggest. It's with God. Here's David's prayer. I don't sense God. I'm not sensing his hand on my life. I'm not sensing his spirit moving in my mind or my heart. I'm feeling quite devoid of God. There's the first break. Anybody ever felt that? Well, I doubt we walk around 24 hours a day saying, I'm completely in communion with God. I know exactly what God's doing in Ukraine. I know what he's doing in this land. I know always what he's doing in my heart. We don't walk around like that this side of eternity. So in some sense, we're sort of like David. We must experience some period when we feel far from God. Prayers are dry, singing is dull, coming to church is a chore. Here's a second break. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day of sorrow in my heart? Head and heart. Well, that's a crisis in himself. I imagine in modern language we might say David's depressed, or he's down, or he's having an episode, whatever the modern term is. But there's the second break. He's not pleased with himself. So not only is God feeling far away, he feels far away in his own mind, in his own heart. And then you get the third break. How long will my enemy triumph over me? So there's the trinity of relationships that a human being can form. You can have a relationship with God, you can have a relationship with yourself, and a relationship with others. And David's plea here is all 3 have gone. It would be tough if one was absent. But if you had the other 2. I mean, atheists say of verse 1, I don't feel God. I don't see God's face, but my mind is happy enough, my heart is happy enough, and to the best of my knowledge, I've got no enemies that want to destroy me. And they can function in life like that. The believer, Paul says, if God is for us, then who can be against us? So the believer might say, if I can have verse 1, then if I don't like myself, at least I know the Lord loves me. If other people want me to fail, at least I know he wants the best for me. David is saying, but I'm experiencing all 3. So you might think, well, it's impossible, surely, to mine any hope there. Is that not the hopeless situation for you and me? Verse 6, he didn't stay there. He was there, absolutely he was there, but he wasn't left there. He didn't stay there. So here's the first hope you can draw from when we're down. David has been there before us. Now that's an encouragement, surely. One has gone before us, and he's gone through. Why would it be different for you? Maybe you are down. And all 3. It won't stay like that. But here's a better hope, even than David being there before you. Jesus Christ has been there for you. I mean, it's wonderful news to say, David was there before me in this place of anxiety and torment. But it's even greater when you can say, Jesus Christ has been there, not before me, but for me. He left the glory of heaven. He left the beauty of eternity to enter this world, to purchase for us something that all our collective works would never purchase if we lived 1,000 years. So even when we are down, not if we're down, when we're down, because down we will go eventually, the Lord is not like Captain Scott. He's not calling you to traverse bereavement, to traverse divorce, to traverse the cost of living, to traverse an addiction or a sin or a disappointment without equipping you for it. When down, David was before you, and Jesus Christ is for you. The second hope I hope you can take is the nature of persistent hope, 3-5. Look on me and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I've overcome him. I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. The thing I see that's missing from verse 3, 4, and 5 is this. A deadline. You ever given people deadlines? I'm accepting this right now, you say. But you know what? My patience is not infinite. If this doesn't improve by next week, maybe, next month, next quarter, next financial quarter, the next time I sit that exam, the next time I walk through a room, if it's not fixed by then, I'm out of here. And that's often how people can behave. Fascinating that David doesn't behave like that before God. That he persists because he understands. There's two things you can do with God's timing. And I said it at Alec McKnight's funeral, one of our elders who died the other week. When you understand God's timing, it's not the same thing as liking God's timing. Liking it and accepting it are two separate things. But when you come to the conviction God does have a time, unlike us, he knows what's happening in geopolitics. Unlike us, he knows what's happening inside us. Then you can resist that timing. Or you can rest in that timing. Resting in it's not being passive. Resting is not doing nothing. It's not folding your arms, keeping a monastic silence and saying, until you change this, you're hearing nothing from me. Resting in God is still being active. It's praying, Lord, please answer me here. Please bring this. It's keeping fellowship. It's keeping worship. Resting in the Lord is an activity believers do, and it's an activity that brings its rewards. Because David is delivered. The sin is not feeling despair. The sin is putting a deadline on how long you're prepared to feel that despair. So let's have no deadlines with the Lord. Let's say he has a timing, and we will rest in that. I don't know why he does what he does. I believe he's got a greater handle on it than I ever could, or any international politician, any economist, any husband, any wife. Take hope from being persistent. And finally, the sure and the certain hope. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. Is David just talking about the past experience? Does he pray 5 verses and wait 10 years, and then eventually when he's in a better place he says, oh, there was a diary entry, I'll go and update it because God has been good. I've waited and he's been good and I can finish that prayer now. Or does David simply live in the present in light of the future? And that's the big difference, isn't it, between the Christian and the non-Christian. The non-Christian is forced to live here and now. And with no certainty. They have absolutely no authority to say tomorrow will be better. In fact, I think we should take them to task on it, and we should remind them the evidence says tomorrow will be tougher than today. There is no evidence whatsoever that with the advancement of human technology, there is an equal improvement of human morality. I mean, we devise greater technology, but I think social media is one of the most ironically named technological advances in recent times because it's the biggest antisocial project under the sun. And we split the atom for electricity. But that's a byproduct. The station that was along in Annan and Eskdale, that was giving us electricity as a byproduct because it was a plutonium maker. Not every nuclear power station was geared up for the production of plutonium and uranium and other elements required for the weapons industry, but that one was. The electricity from it was the benefit we got after we'd made the raw materials we required for the Ministry of Defence. Advancing in technology, to be sure. Advancing in morality, I don't think anybody can say that's the trajectory of the human race. And David's point is when you're with the Lord, you can say, ultimately, tomorrow will be better. The ultimate tomorrow will be. Thus, unlike Captain Scott, who bravely called those men, who bravely followed, they all died because he failed to equip them. And as we take communion this morning, wherever we are traversing this life, some are here, some are down there, some are motoring on in the middle, wherever we are, when you take the bread and wine, you remind yourself, I'm being called to a banquet greater than Elizabeth's at Holyrood House. But not only am I being called, when I respond in faith, I'm being equipped. Let that be your hope today.